Beginning in the middle of the 1930s, the tensions in Europe already running high following the Nazis' rise to power, the Office of Strategic Services in Britain began to receive reports that the Germans, led by the occultists of the Thule Society, were investigating paranormal phenomenon with the potential for military applications. At first, these reports were dismissed as superstitious nonsense, but when further reports of inexplicable events during the Spanish Civil War were linked to the nationalist German allies, the OSS decided to pay a little more attention to what the Nazis were really up to. In truth, the Nazis were using the conflict in Spain as an opportunity to field test a newly developed unit known as the Geheimnisvolle Abwehrmacht, or Mysterious Defenders. This unit, made up entirely of supernatural gifted soldiers, was deployed on Spain's northern front where they posed as intelligence support for the Condor Legion to disguise their occult activities. On the field, their skills were employed to devastating effect. No target was safe from their assaults. Bombs would strike with unnerving accuracy, bullets would move around obstacles to reach hidden foes, and high-ranking Republican officials would die of heart attacks or spontaneous combustion inside their secure bunkers, slain from afar by unseen assassins. By the time the conflict was over, it was clear that the Germans had changed the nature of warfare, and that other nations would have to pursue paranormal investigations of their own if they wanted to keep up. Towards the end, Great Britain decided to consult the wisdom of their nation's foremost expert on the subject, the notorious occultist Aleister Crowley. Under Crowley's supervision, the OSS conducted a survey of its records, looking through field reports, psych evaluations, and other documents for indicators of soldiers displaying paranormal ability. Those that had were contacted, and, of these, the most promising candidates were selected to form an elite special forces unit that the OSS had dubbed Black Watch. For the next several months, these chosen few worked closely with Crowley to develop their supernatural talents, learning how to use magic to enhance their ammunition, correctly identify paranormal and psychic phenomenon, and make use of ancient relics to aid their efforts in battle. Meanwhile, the OSS began sharing information with the Americans who had recently formed their own supernatural intelligence agency, the Department of Occult Warfare. This agency, a covert division of the U.S. Army Chaplain Court, dealt primarily with data analysis, while Black Watch and the OSS handled field work and information gathering. Together, the two organizations worked to get the Allied nations up to speed so that, by the time World War II broke out, they were ready to handle anything the Germans threw at them. And, as it turned out, the Germans were planning to unleash something truly apocalyptic in scope. While researching the Order of the Knights Templar for leads on the Holy Grail, members of the Thule Society came across a series of documents detailing the legend of the Firstborn and the Order's involvement at Al-Khali. Intrigued by the possibility of enlisting such a powerful entity towards their cause, the Germans sent a detachment of the Geheimnisvolle Abwehrmacht to investigate, led by the infamous psychic interrogator Hannah Lichthammer. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed model of Aryan perfection, Lichthammer earned her reputation during the Spanish Civil War, where she used her telepathic abilities to silently extract information from captured foes. More than this, however, Hannah was known for her overt sadomasochistic tendencies and her love of torture for torture's sake. She took great pleasure in the destruction of her victims' minds, often psychically manipulating them into committing horrible atrocities while she just sat back and watched. Horror stories circulated throughout the Republican ranks, stories of mothers being forced to eat their own children, men cutting themselves open and pulling out their insides, and, to Lichthammer's credit, all of these stories were true. At Al-Khali, Lichthammer and her men were ordered to find the Sumerian temple spoken of in the legend. A psychic sweep of the area allowed them to pinpoint the source of the supernatural power emanating from beneath the sands, and, as fighting erupted in Europe, excavation of the ruins began. When news of their activities reached the OSS in Britain, a 7-man Black Watch squad under the command of Major Patrick Buckland was dispatched to neutralize Lichthammer and prevent the Germans from obtaining the secrets of Al-Khali. This in and of itself proved to be a relatively simple task. Lichthammer and her men were formidable opponents, to be sure, but they were ultimately no match for the battle-hardened veterans of Black Watch. It was what came next that proved to be the real challenge. For though the Germans had been defeated, Buckland's team had arrived too late. The door to the Pyxis had already been opened. From within, the Firstborn beckoned to them, its malevolence threatening to seep out into the world and infect the land like a disease. The 7 warriors knew then what had to be done. And so, with bravery and resignation, they stepped into the breach, suddenly finding themselves transported to the gates of a 13th century fortress beset by the undead. There they met Sir Richard, who recognized them as warriors of God and helped them to reach the next layer of the box. Then, like their predecessors before them, they fought their way through the layers of the Pyxis, resurrected onto Darunu, and lent him their powers to help him reseal the breach. And, like their predecessors before them, they were rewarded for their efforts with a one-way trip back to their frozen moment in time, to the eternal trenches of Al-Khali, where they wage an unceasing war against the fallen Nazi soldiers, and wait for the next group of heroes to pass through. Following the Germans' defeat at Al-Khali and the disappearance of Major Buckland's team, the DOW decided to take on a more active role in the occult warfare, training their own field agents and sending them out to accompany their British allies on missions of paranormal significance. At Al-Khali, members of both organizations came together to establish Outpost Vigil, a paranormal research facility dedicated to monitoring the dimensional rift and providing advance warning if it ever showed signs of opening again. 65 years later, it did. If you're resigned to your fate, time to subscribe to your fears.
Come and play with us.